I got out of my vehicle, I looked at the herbicide list. I saw that there was only one product that was approved, one soil product, right? PPI on the list. So, as he was mentioning, you can use that to really narrow down some of your options. Which is the only product that looks like it was on the ground and able to prevent weeds from emerging? Good job. Number 6. And this is this is the one he was saying it's single products, but the Broadaxe is a combination. It has some metolachlor, I believe that's S&M, and it also has the same active ingredient that we find in Spartan. So you may be able to see some Spartan injury on some of the broadleaves or some of the tips of the grass plants. That shows up as slight chlorosis. Like some of this corn is showing the tips. Some of that discoloration may be from the soil applied PPO type product. Most of the PPO inhibitors are post-emergence contact products, but a couple of them like Valor and Spartan and Sharpen are soil applied products that can come up through the root system as well. So the combination with the metolachlor to pick up the grasses and then the sulfentrazone or the Spartan to control broadleaf, you can see that it did a pretty good job on most of the species in here. Very heavy population of grasses and also the buckwheat. So there are plants coming through. The Canada thistle, as a very durable perennial, will not be affected hardly at all by either of those products, because we're dealing with rootstock plant generation rather than seeds that are trying to emerge. If the thistle that was coming up was a true seedling, they may also be affected by the product, but most of the Canada thistle in our cropland North Dakota is going to be coming back from that perennial rootstock, and so most soil applied products will not have enough lasting effect on it to kill that population and have to come in and clean it up post-emergence. Any questions about Broadaxe? Any questions about other soil applied products? We don't have any other examples here, so if you have questions. Several of the combinations in the market now are pairing up something like the metolachlor or an acetochlor for grasses with other things that are more targeted towards the larger seeded broadleaf weeds, so that they get that full spectrum. So if we go to the post-emerge products, as you looked across the whole thing, there's one strip that really stood out to me, and that was this one over here. This is a very unique and characteristic symptom. What do you think that symptom is? Bleaching. It is not just causing yellowing, which is chlorosis. We see chlorosis from several products, but we actually have white tissue because these bleaching herbicides prevent the production of pigments, and they help to damage and destroy the pigments that are already in the plant. So that's why without any pigmentation, that's why the plants turn up looking white. It is possible for these herbicides to cause more of a chlorotic symptomology like we see here on the Canada thistle. It's not a pure white, it's more of a yellowish white, but it is a bright yellow-white combination rather than a greenish yellow that we typically see from things like glyphosate and a lot of the Express and other ALS inhibitors. Those typically are a darker yellow, almost a greenish yellow chlorosis.
Are those Canada thistle plants dead and they just don't know it yet, or are they just bleached and they're going to make it?
They are just bleached and they will continue to grow. The white portion will probably follow that growing point up the plant, and as the chemical continues to move up in the plant and it comes out of the older tissue, then color comes back into that older tissue. I have not seen. What's that? Just kind of made them mad, slows them down. As you can see, I know it's only been a week. There might be a little bit of size difference, but for a full season situation, at the end of the season, those Canada thistle typically will be quite a bit taller still, and they'll start producing flower buds and produce seed and everything else. You know, Command, you know, Bob mentioned, you know, it looks like Command was sprayed out here, and that is a very old product that has not been used in North Dakota because it's very volatile, and this bleaching symptom can show up on tree lines and gardens very easily. And when I was growing up, when my dad had some Command left over, and he sprayed some Canada thistle plants around at our building site, and that Canada thistle plant continued to grow, and the bull thistle continued to grow. They were pure white for the entire season, but none of them died. So it's not a strong enough product to be able to kill thistle plants and perennial broadleaves. They'll show a lot of symptomology, but it will not kill them. Now, if this were sprayed with something like Raptor, the coloration at the top of the Canada thistle plant would be more of that darker yellow like I was talking about. Raptor is an ALS inhibitor, inhibits the amino acids in the plant, and so it stunts their growth. And I have had plots where the Canada thistle do not grow more than an inch or two after the application, but the plant continues, the base of the plant continues to be green, and the root system seems to continue growing, even though the top portion doesn't. And those areas of the research plots, the next year, that treatment is just covered with Canada thistle shoots. So it's really good management in crop to limit harvest problems, but you still really need something like the glyphosate pre or post harvest, or something like Wide Match or Stinger to really reduce the growth of that Canada thistle and eliminate some of that root mass underneath. There are a lot of products that fall within this category. Most recently, it is the category that every company seems to be coming with something. They're either discovering their own active, or they are in marketing agreements with other people so that, you know, they have access to it. It's HPPD inhibitors. They are quite effective. They are safe in corn, but not in a whole lot of other crops. Are registered for many of the products, but Callisto and Impact and Armazon, and there's another big one I'm forgetting, Laudis. They are all within this same type of chemistry. So we've got 2 down, 6 to go. Well, I think let's walk back down that direction. We'll get rid of a couple of others before we start talking about the confusion that lies within glyphosate, glufosinate, and paraquat. Anybody fairly confident on their answer for number 2 or 3? No?
So Foxfire for number 2.
Foxfire for number 2. And why would you say that?
Good guess.
Good guess. No, you had it. Let's at least say it's an educated guess. Okay.
Guess. Scientific.
So well, what are some of the things that led you to that decision?
Well, it would be some of the weed. It wasn't the grasses.
So Foxfire, I know a number of you have been asking. Foxfire is a combination of Puma and Axial. So it's a grass herbicide only, used in small grains. So corn could still be showing injury. The foxtails should show injury. The broadleaves should really not be touched at all. And as you look down the line, all the broadleaf crops look fine. The buckwheat is starting to get a little red tint. That's just because it's a heavy population. You know, the plant's nutrient deficient, but the buckwheat's still growing very well and it's not being affected. What is our telltale symptom for ACCase, or Group 1 injury on grass? The inner whorl can be pulled out. So as you go down the line, I know there's not a lot of grass plants, but there's plenty of foxtail. And if you are to pull on the top of the foxtail, it pulls out pretty easily. And the base of this, which should be pure white, is already starting to look brown. in the book you have a picture where they're pulling it out and it's a dark brown and it's all slimy and mushy looking. It eventually gets to be that point after probably 2 weeks. This has only been 1 week, so we don't have that much symptomology. But if you were to do the same thing with a plant, one of the foxtail plants over here, it snaps out a lot more briskly because you have to pull on it harder. And if you hold them up to each other and you compare the color, you definitely see that the strip number 2 is off color brownish. We've got more chlorosis. The inner whorl is already dying. So you can, it's good as you got them side by side and you can see that difference because it's not always very obvious. If you're in a field and you're just pulling up those plants, they may all look kind of all right, but if you go to the field margin, you go to the road ditch, and you pull off another one from there, you'll very easily be able to tell a difference if an ACCase inhibitor, that group 1 chemistry, is causing the problem in the field. So what did you notice along in the strip number 3? Strip 2 is Foxfire. Strip number 3, it's got lots of nice wheat. Looks like it's possibly a wheat product because there isn't any difference between these two. You see what's happening with the field pea back there? A lot of kinking. It's kind of a kinky chemical. The buckwheat is showing some of the symptom also. It does not twist as much, but you can see a little bit of a corkscrew on the petioles of the leaves, and some of the growing points are kind of turned down towards the ground. That's epinasty. It's unregulated growth. The plants are growing in a weird way, and that is our key symptom for growth regulators, PGR chemistries. Dicamba and 2,4-D are the ones that everybody thinks of most often, but what on the list is also in that family of chemistry? Starane. Fluroxapyr is plant growth regulator, and it does not show as dramatic epinastic symptomology typically, but it still has the effect, and the field pea, as you can see back there, is definitely demonstrating that issue. It is possible to identify some injury on grasses once in a while, applied at the too late of a growth stage. It can cause some problems with the inflorescence. Emerging, the awns can be twisted, so it is possible to get injury even on wheat and some of the other small grains following an application. Within corn, if applied at a time when the plants are very susceptible because of the environment, you can get some brittleness in the stems, especially for something like dicamba. The roots, the brace roots, can fuse together and start growing up in the air from 2,4-D applications. Sometimes if the herbicide is on the soil and as those brace roots come down and start touching the surface of the soil, a high application rate of something like dicamba or 2,4-D can actually cause those brace roots to stop growing, damage that terminal end so that you don't get the cell division. It hardens off, it becomes very brittle, and that's what leads to green snap and that brittleness within the stem. So we have Foxfire, we've got the Starane Ultra, we have the Broadaxe up there, and Laudis. We're well on our way, aren't we? Let's talk about Marvel. Marvel is a combination of a couple of PPO inhibitors, and the PPO inhibitors have become very popular recently because they're some of the only chemicals left that will kill kochia. So whether it's a soil applied PPO or a post applied PPO, we're putting a lot of selection pressure on the kochia populations with all of these products. The two active ingredients in non-translocated. So we're looking for a strip where we have broadleaf activity, more broadleaf. There might be some grass injury, but it's really broadleaf. We're looking something where you just see damage on the lower leaves because it doesn't translocate up into that new growing tissue. Sometimes you see spots on the leaves. Sometimes it'll burn off the whole plot of leaves. Anybody have a strip written down for Marvel, or remember seeing that symptomology in one of the strips we have left? What did you guys have? You had a good answer before. I guess 5. The man says 5. Where's strip 5? That's over here. Well, if you look at the buckwheat, we definitely see that spotting, right? It is injurious to the broadleaves. The grasses, not so much. We do have speckling on the lower grass plants, which is not unreasonable for this herbicide. Things like AIM and Cadet and some of the other PPO inhibitors can definitely cause very localized spotting injury on grass plants. Buckwheat's really hard to kill, so that's why we're not seeing a whole lot of burning on those plants either. If we had pigweeds, for instance, in here, they're very susceptible to PPO inhibitors, and they would probably completely be fried off. We see the base of the field peat. A lot of those older leaves are almost completely scorched off, but the top of the plant looks fine. So non-translocating, contact product, very rapid activity. It sounds a lot like Paraquat, doesn't it? A lot of you that have used Paraquat or Gramoxone type products. Key difference is that with Paraquat, we're going to see a lot of scorch on all the grasses as well as the broadleaves. Here we're seeing the damage on the broadleaves, but not really the grasses. The grasses are coming through, especially the Foxfire, not showing much injury at all. So, good job. See, you're 2 for 2. I just have to go to you, Hector. I've got a question. So that's that one. We've already talked about Broadaxe, Laudis. I think we are down now to the 3 non-selective products, right? Glyphosate, Liberty, used to be Ignite, now it's Liberty, Glyphosate, and the Paraquat or Gramoxone. We're left with numbers 4, 8, and 1. So now with these 3 products, we have 2 of them are contact and 1 translocates. And of course, you guys have probably all are very aware that glyphosate translocates. It is what we use for perennial weed control because the herbicide will actually move in the plant and get down into the root system, right? So does this strip look like a contact or a translocating product? Contact. Why do you say contact?
It didn't move up, right?
Because what?
It just stayed at the bottom?
Just stayed at the bottom. Here, looking at the wheat or on the buckwheats, the newest tissue on these plants looks very healthy. Yeah, it doesn't look good because all of the existing tissue is damaged, it's all dying, but the newest couple of leaves have good color. They're going to come out of it, be set back in growth stage a little bit, but these will probably, if they were allowed to survive, they would produce seed yield. They might not be a bumper crop, but the growing point on grasses especially is protected at early stages, and so that growing point is going to be able to come through it and still produce some yield. As opposed to something where it's translocated, you see the injury all the way up through the newest tissue. So if this is contact product, it means we have the choice between the Liberty and the Gramoxone. Which one is it? What might we be able to use to identify? This is where specific knowledge of the weeds might come in handy, but especially the fact that he told you we have transgenic corn, soybean, and canola out here.
Is this Liberty Link corn?
So yeah, we have Roundup Ready corn. corn looks, well, sorry, yeah, so if it was Roundup Ready corn, we're looking at choice between Liberty or Gramoxone. Either one of those things would be damaging the corn. Do we have a transgenic crop out here that might be able to separate these two for us? How many canola growers? Wow, maybe that's why. The InVigor canola trait is a crop system, and I think that they have incorporated with that InVigor grouping Liberty link in almost all of the InVigor options. So, if we were to go back and look at the canola in this strip and see if it has any damage, that would be able to tell, right? You even have to walk all the way down here to tell me whether this canola is being injured by this herbicide. You've got canola 6 inches tall on either side, and there's still some canola in there, but it's almost gone, right? So we definitely have damage here on this canola. So this wasn't Liberty. Then the only thing left is Gramoxone, Paraquat. Contact, very rapid activity, but if you don't get good coverage, if you don't have a high enough rate, those larger plants or plants that are shielded underneath the other canopy portion, those will be able to survive, and there's enough buckwheat surviving out of here that by the end of the season you wouldn't hardly be able to tell the difference between that and the untreated strip, because those plants will recover very fast.
Just an example for those of you that don't have experience with Paraquat. I sprayed this, ended up probably at, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I sprayed in here. And when I went home that night at 5, when I drove by, I could already see the strip. Very heavy.
Already turning brown, getting limp. So we have now, which strips left? 1 and 4. As we were walking around, I know that I talked with a number of you about the canola, using that as a key. So between strips 1 and 4, we know that we're dealing now with either Roundup or the Liberty. And just looking at the symptomology on the two, at this point, it kind of almost looks like that one was contact, because the wheat and the grasses are all so brown already. But Roundup is very effective on small grasses, especially when temperatures start to get quite warm. In the last week, we've really hit our first high, really high summer temperatures. Those grasses were small, very susceptible, so it almost looks like a contact product was sprayed back there. But if you look at this strip, it's more typical of the contact injury, whereas you look at the field pea, for instance, the top portion of that plant is growing new tissue, and it looks fairly healthy. If you look at the field pea back there, the new tissue is looking chlorotic. It's not completely burnt off at the bottom. It takes longer for glyphosate to work typically. So we have good looking corn in strip 4 back there, and we have good looking canola, relatively speaking, not that it's a stellar planting, but the canola is not showing herbicide injury here, the corn is not showing herbicide injury there. So we have a contact burning product here, Liberty. We have a Liberty Link canola, and up there we've got a lot of really good weed control with glyphosate, and the corn surviving fairly healthy.
Liberty's the first bit.
Yes. Yeah, Liberty on Roundup Ready corn, if you look in the weed guide towards the back, I think it's page 119, we have herbicides that can be used to control transgenic years. And at the early growth stages, Liberty very effective with Roundup Ready corn.